fifth grade. Today's lesson is over using protractors, and we use protractors to measure and draw angles. Remember, a protractor is this math tool right here, and we're going to learn how to use it today to measure and draw angles on our paper. So we are just going to get started right away with number 1 here. The first thing we'll always want to do is we need to extend one side of our angle to make it longer. That will just make it easier when we're using our protractor. So this side that's flat, I'm just going to leave that side alone. It will be fine. But the side that's sticking up, I'm going to make it longer. So I'm just going to line up my protractor as like a straight edge here on the flat side. Line it up nicely. And then I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw over that to extend it longer. And I'm going to extend it all the way up there into my title. We just want it to be nice and long so that it's easy to see where that line goes. So now you can see that it's longer. Then I need to line my protractor up correctly. So on this protractor, there is a hole right here in the center, and that hole has to be lined up with the corner of my angle. So I'm going to line up that hole right here with the corner, just like that. And then this little line on my protractor has to be lined up perfectly with that flat side of my angle. So I'm going to rotate this until it is right there. So you'll notice my hole is still right over the corner of my angle, but that little line that was on my protractor has now disappeared right there into that line of my angle. So if I rotate it, look, you can see that line again, but when I line it up perfectly, that line disappears. It just blends right in. That's how I know it's lined up perfectly. Now, I'm going to use my protractor just like we did digitally yesterday. I just have to decide which number to use. So I'm looking at this angle. It is acute. So I know I need to use the smaller numbers because this is an acute angle. So as I'm looking here, my line for my angle runs right through 70 and 110, just like we were looking yesterday. Well, since this is an acute angle, it would be 70 degrees. So I would put 70, and then remember my degree sign is just that little circle up in the air, just like that. All right, let's try again with number 2. Remember that flat side stays the same, it's fine, but I'm gonna extend this side longer. So using my protractor as a flat edge, I'm gonna wanna line it up nicely, trace over, and then keep drawing so that line gets longer. Perfect. Then I want to line it up. Remember, hole over the corner, and that line on my protractor should disappear into the line on my angle. Just like that, it is lined up perfectly. Now, before I choose the number here, I want to look. This is an obtuse angle. This is very, very big. It's obtuse. So I want to use my bigger numbers. As I look up through here, it is passing through 70 and 110. I'm just looking where that line goes through, just like yesterday on our iPads. And if this is obtuse, I want to choose my big number. So this angle is 110. I'm going to go ahead and write down 110 and the degree symbol. All right, let's try just a couple more. Let's do number 4 next. My flat side is fine. I'm going to extend my other side just a little. I don't have a lot of room with my paper, but that's okay. So use the flat side of your protractor as a straight edge. Draw a line to extend. All right, that's as far as I can go, so that will have to work. Line up my protractor, so put that hole right over the corner. Line up that line on my protractor with the bottom of my angle right there. And then I'm going to look and see, thinking this is an obtuse angle, so I need to use my big numbers. It's running through 30 and 150. So this angle must be 150 degrees. 150, remember that degree sign is right there. All right, number 3 looks a little bit weird, so I'm gonna have to rotate my notebook so that I have a flat side. So I'm gonna use this X as my flat side, so I need to make the one with the Z longer. So I'm gonna use this as a straight edge, just like we were before. I just had to turn my notebook because this angle was a little bit different. Extend it out long there, so I'll be able to read it easily. Then I'm going to line it up. So stick that right there in the corner. Make sure that line on my protractor disappears with the line that is for my angle on my paper. Perfect. And then I'm looking, this is a really small angle. It must be acute, so I need to use an acute number, which would be a small number. This is passing through 30 and 150. So my acute number would be 30. So this angle would be 30. Oops, sorry, you can't see that very good. 30 degrees. So just like yesterday, making that choice between the small and the big numbers, what's different is you have to line up your protractor and make sure it's lined up nicely so that you get the right measurement. Now, we are also going to talk about drawing angles. So we can use a protractor to draw our own angles as well. So we're going to do a couple of practice here. In order to draw an angle, the very first thing that you need is just a straight side. So I'm going to scooch down a little bit so I have room, and I'm just going to use the flat side of my protractor, and I'm just going to draw a line. Doesn't have to be super long. I just like to make it about that long. On one end of my line, I need to have an arrow, because if you notice with all of these other angles we've been using, they always have arrows on the end. And on the other end, I want to put my dot, because that's where I'm going to line up my protractor. Then I'm going to line my protractor up. So just the same as we were before, that hole goes over the dot. I need to make sure the line on my protractor is lined up right with the line that I just made on my paper. Now, here's where we have to be careful. Our arrow is pointing this way. Whichever way my arrow is pointing, I have to start at that 0. So since my arrow is pointing here, I'm starting with 0. So I'm using these bottom numbers because I have to start at 0. I'm not going to start at 180. That wouldn't make sense. So my arrow is pointing this way. Here's the 0, so I'm going to start there. We are going to make a 50-degree angle. So starting at 0, I'm going to follow up till I get to 50. Once I get to 50, I'm going to make a little mark right there on my page, kind of like a little tick mark. Then I can move my protractor, and you'll see here's my mark that I made. That was where 50 was at. Now I'm going to play connect the dots. So line your protractor up with your straight edge with that mark you made, and you have to connect it down here to the dot, so we'll make a little angle. So line it up nicely. Draw a line to connect those. And then think, this was an acute angle, is 50 degrees. So does it look like an acute angle? Yes, it does. I need to put an arrow on the end of this line because they both usually have an arrow on the end. And for a finishing touch, I always like to put the degrees inside of here. So this was 50 degrees. I like to write that there so that someone else knows that's the degree of my angle. Let's try another one. Scooch down on my paper. You always want to give yourself plenty of room here. First, remember I need a straight edge. So I'm going to use the straight part of my protractor and draw a straight line here. That's what we want to start with. On one end of that line, I need to put an arrow. And on the other end, I need to put my dot because I need that to line my protractor up. Once I have that, I'm going to line my protractor up. The hole goes over the dot. The line on the protractor disappears with the line I made on my page. And this time, let's make an obtuse angle. Let's go 140. Okay, remember, my arrow is pointing this way, so I'm going to start at 0 right here. And I'm going to go all the way around following those numbers all the way to 140. And I'm going to make a little tick mark right there so I know where 140 is at. Now, when I move my protractor, 140 would be obtuse, so make sure it looks like it's going to be obtuse, and it definitely does. If it looks like it's acute, I know I've used the wrong 140 on my protractor. But this one looks obtuse, so connect the dots, line up your straight edge of your protractor with both those marks, connecting it back to this dot you have down here to make an angle. Remember, I want to add an arrow on the end so that both ends have an arrow. And for a finishing touch, we always want to write on the center what degrees we did, which was 140 degrees. All right, we're going to do one more here just to make sure you've got it. So scooch down just a little bit more on my page. First, I need a straight side for my angle. So I'm going to do a straight side here. On one end of that, I need an arrow. And on the other end, I need my dot. Once I have that, I line my protractor up. So put that hole over the dot, line up that line that you made with your paper with the line on the protractor so it disappears. And let's do a little tiny one. Let's do 10 degrees. So remember, my arrow is pointing this way, so I start at this 0. The 10 is right here, but notice I can't make a little tick mark underneath the 10 like we've been doing because the protractor's in the way. When we were at 50, I could because there was an open space, but I can't here. but I can just follow that along right here to the outside of the protractor and make my tick mark out here. So I can still make it, I just can't make it in here. I'm gonna have to go to the outside and make it right there. All right, remember 10 degrees, that should be acute. So I'm looking, yeah, it's gonna be acute, it's gonna be really small. So line up the straight edge of my protractor. I'm gonna play connect the dots with my tick mark back to that dot that I have in the corner of my angle. And this side's gonna be a little bit longer, that's okay. Remember on the end, I wanna put an arrow because that's how angles go on the ends. And for a finishing touch, we want to write our degrees in the center. We're going to have to write really small this time. This one is 10 degrees. Perfectly just like that. So now you know how to use a protractor to draw angles, to measure angles. If you are at home, you might have to wait till you get back to school to be able to do this assignment because you're going to need a protractor. If you don't have a protractor at home, that's okay. You can wait till you get back to school and you can borrow one of my protractors. But protractors are what we use to measure and draw angles. See you later. Bye.